But if I'm hearing them say something.
You're allowed to talk, you're just not allowed to talk.
We appreciate the input. Yeah. They find.
Recording in progress.
Here. Cuts us off. Okay. We're good to go. We'll call the Cathay Regional District Planning Committee meeting for Tuesday, March 25th already. The order. Amazing. It's already March. We have a large agenda ahead of us and some more business after that. So first thing I'd like to acknowledge, we're holding this meeting on the traditional and ancestral territories of the Tla'amin and other First Nations. And we'll be meeting with them later today, which we're looking forward to. The first order of business is approval of the agenda. Thank you, Director McCormick.
Thank you, Chair. I'd like to approve or move approval of the agenda with the addition of item 13.1, which is the FYI item that's on our agenda now. I would like to move it to business arising from correspondence. So that would make it 7.1, I guess. And with that change, I would move the agenda.
Thank you.
I would second, and I would also request reconsideration of the Nootka Street rezoning application that we dealt with last month, and I would explain why if
Okay.
with the assembly.
Yes, please explain.
My understanding is the way our procedure bylaw works is, and development cost charges, is that it's up to the board to actually make the final decision. And it was a 2-2 split for actually denying the application. And if we do end up, reiterating, say we're going to deny the application, then we should at least send some kind of forwarding on to the board, because otherwise the board doesn't say yes or no. So I think we should reconsider it, especially in light of all the other items for the Nootka Street zoning.
Okay, so what are you proposing?
That we add it as, well, we could put it under new business if we want. Does that make sense?
Okay, we already have 9.1 referred from our regional board meeting.
And that's, yeah,
9.2 is the actual bylaw.
But we can have it as 9.3.
I'm fine with adding that if it helps the discussion. Any objections? Okay, so that would be 9.3. Are we keeping track? We are missing our corporate officer today, so we'll be at the behest of our CEO. All right, so with that, we have those two changes. Do I have a seconder to adopt the agenda? I think that would be with that change. All those in favor? Opposed? That's carried. Thank you. Right, scrolling back up so I don't miss anything. Adoption of the minutes. Do we have any errors or omissions of our last? Being none, can I have a mover for adoption? Gisborne, thank you. Any discussion? All those in favor? That's carried. All right, we do have, it looks like, some delegations here. So 4.1 is our first delegation. Michael Rogers, professional land surveyor, Polaris. Yeah, I think you know the drill with our presentations, and we do have some matters to discuss after that. So would you like to come before us now and give us a brief synopsis, or any questions at the end?
Yeah, which is 4.1.
Oh, I'm sorry. That's the 15 lot Bear Land Strata Subdivision 1480 and 8024.
Okay, perfect. So it was,
Oh, sorry.
It was
And 46.
and 46.
Sorry, yes. Reading further on.
The 2-lot subdivision on taxated, unless anybody has any questions, super straightforward. That one aside, okay, perfect. So the Jim Aegis.
You want to maybe just step forward and just officially do our little, so just introduce yourself, and we may have some questions for you, but please.
Actually, thanks. I'm always.
I know. All good. Right up here.
Right up here. Okay.
It helps us too to kind of go through the.
Okay.
Yeah.
Seated?
Sure.
Sure.
Maybe Jim can come up.
Sure. Yeah, sure. We usually give 10 minutes. I think you know and then some room for questions.
Perfect. So Jim he represents the ownership group behind the development. Most of you are probably familiar with Jim Agius. He's been here for eons. So yeah, sort of.
Hey, I'm right.
That's okay. I'm not familiar with all of you, but yeah, Jim Agius, born and raised in this lovely town. Moved away for 20 years, Vancouver Island, been in construction and development most of my life and doing the same thing back here in Powell River. Still I'm active in the Victoria area, and with a group of investors out of the Vancouver area have purchased this beautiful 188 acres, which we used to refer to as Wolfson Bay and then Mahoods Beach, but now we call it Lion Creek.
Okay.
And we've got this 15 lot and 46 lot proposed subdivision that we'd like to move ahead with.
So as we'll get into a little bit more on what's been done to date. But for now, introductions, Michael. The last time when we were here, we talked about Strata. My apologies, I had to leave right away. I had some prior commitments, so my apologies. But it's fitting that we're dealing with Strata again. So we can maybe answer some unanswered questions as to what a Bearland Strata is. Strata in general is an ownership, a tenure type in British Columbia that has two components. One is actual ownership and the other is shared ownership. So anyone who buys a Strata unit or a Strata lot in British Columbia, you actually own something. Title is raised to something. You own that, just as a fee simple lot. But you also own part of something else, something that's shared. So in British Columbia, there are principally two types of strata. The first and more common is called a strata, but it's actually referred to in many instances as a building strata. And that's the condo. This structure here is part of a strata. The regional district owns strata units in this building. So a strata, building strata, what defines the limits of ownership of a lot are the actual physical floor, ceiling, and walls. You own that. You have title to that. But with the other owners, you may share hallways, elevators, recreational facilities. There's implied easements for all the infrastructure that goes through the walls and things like that. So that's a building strata. What is being presented here with these developments is a Bearland strata. And with a Bearland strata, you actually own land. What you own, what you're given title to, is land. What defines those boundaries is the same as a fee simple lot. It's those pins that we as put in on the corners. You own that land. But as with any strata, you share something. There's stratas in the province where the shared entities are sewerage systems, water systems, landing strips for airports, equestrian centers, harbors. Can be anything that the ownership group shares. So with these, and these are separate. These are you guys have seen this this development not that long ago when we created two parcels. So the waterfront portion, what's shared is the access road. That'll be shared. And then recreational facility or feature, which includes the access down to Wolfson Bay and the boat ramp. Those are the entities that will be shared. The actual parcels will be owned. And then on the uplands portion, right, what will be shared is the access road. And then there's a trail that provides access down to Lane Creek or the Lane Creek area. That'll be the shared entity in that Bearland strata. So the roads, those are the two major things that are shared on these, because they're owned by the stratas themselves. construction and maintenance, further maintenance and use of those roads are limited to the strata. That becomes the responsibility of the strata. That's why the Ministry of Transportation, they speak less to strata roads than they do to public roads, because these roads are limited to the ownership of the owners there. They still have to be built to good standard, engineering standard. They have to be safe, but the standards are a bit different than a public road. So again, they are separate. The applications are separate. They just, the timing ended up being the same, that being presented here. But the reason we want to deal with them separately is these types of developments deal with some different entities that tend to affect the way development progresses quite differently. So we wanted to make sure one was holding up the other. The upland strata is a phase strata. And that's another bit of complexity to it. And what phasing does is allow the developer to create a specific number of lots at a time, complete the infrastructure needed for those lots, sell those lots, and then at a future date, go on to the next phase. It's quite an undertaking to be building the infrastructure and putting 40 lots at one time on the market. So the province, in their wisdom, has allowed for phasing for developers, so they can actually get through a large development like this in a more reasonable manner. To date, to create these two parcels, a few things have been done. Maybe Jim can speak to those regarding the trail and things like that down to Noland. I just put him on the spot. So.
No problem.
No problem.
Probably all very aware of the trail system that used to lead to Mahud's Beach, and it was on private property, and it was actually on the closer to the corner of Highway 101, and there's a little bit of an unsafe access and with vehicles in and out of that parking lot, and then there was a trail that basically led straight down the beach. So in cooperation with Reno Prise, which you might probably all know from Modi, we built a trail on Weldwood Road, because Weldwood Road goes all the way right down to the beach. So we built a trail, a parking lot and a trail that took us away from the corner. The sight lines are great because now you can pull out and actually see in both directions well enough to be able to leave the property. And but the trail goes straight down to the beach. And one of the things that we realized is when we took the trail straight down to the beach is that where Mahud's Beach is, where most people do go, to the south of it is quite a rocky area, which is in front of this area. But to the south of that is a beautiful sandy beach as well too. So this new trail has created access to that side of the beach too. A lot of the locals call it the family name, that beach, the beachfront. Sorry.
You got the mill. Yes.
Yeah. Maitland Beach, Maitland Beach, right? So it's so now a lot of people are going down that route and actually enjoying the Maitland Beach area as well too. So we've done that in the meantime. We're actually presently on site, if anybody was to ask, with the machine, and we're actually punching in the first phase roads and doing preliminary perk tests for Vancouver Coastal Health. So we've punched in the road for most of phase 1. We've dug most of the test holes, and they're actually going to start doing the perk test later this week.
So up till now, we've done a lot of work with the Ministry of Transportation regarding access and traffic on the road, and we have the current concepts. I don't know. I think we're on to probably revision 7, working with their engineers and their traffic folks. And with that, on the lower land subdivision or application here, we have this area that is in magenta or purple would be a proposed What we proposed is a right of way that would be in the name of the regional district that would provide public access down to the rock wave brick or pier. So then you'd have access both to what Jim referred to as the Maitland Beach and access on the other side of the rocky area to the Noland Beach area.
So once complete, there will basically be the 2 beach access trails. There'll be a parking lot right below the road. Pretty much a wheelchair accessible. This misty trail, top of it, goes down here, that's steep at the bottom.
As you can see, we've reached our time. If there's anything critical that you haven't been able to, then let us know right now.
No, I think we're good unless there's questions.
Yeah, so we do open it up to directors for questions. Obviously, Area C is the area that we're talking about. Director Brander.
Thanks, Chair. Thanks very much for coming in today. This is obviously going to be a big change for the residents of Area C, and there's a lot of people who have been using the property for many, many years for all sorts of things, even though it is private property. I just want to show my appreciation to Mr. Agius and his group for making efforts here to, I guess, mitigate some of the issues that the public may have, especially adding the second beach access point to Mahoods Beach, because I know it's challenging to go from the trail that you've already created over to Mahoods. So I think I really appreciate that. I think a lot of people will appreciate that. My questions primarily stem around the parking area that you have designated along the Weldwood Road there. Like how many stalls are you anticipating having there? Because I know right now that I really appreciate the parking spaces that have been created, but I understand that sometimes people have to park on the high side of the highway, which causes it's risky crossing the highway there. So I was wondering how extensive is that parking area going to be? And I was also wondering if you intend on having any restroom facilities either closer to the red area on the map or in the parking area, because that's beneficial for anybody visiting the beach, but it's also really beneficial for anybody who has waterfront property down there. Right. You can understand the reasons. Anyway.
So back to the parking, yeah, there's no guidelines as to how much parking we should supply. I mean, we'd be definitely willing to supply, compacted gravel parking areas. And, whether it's a dozen or 20, it doesn't really matter to us. We could. Yeah, I really don't know where you would get that number from.
Right.
Because, there's, 5,000 people living in that general area. And then as for the washroom facilities, no, we haven't entertained any washroom facilities at this point.
Okay. Something to keep in the back of your head, I guess.
Yeah, so the parking area will be even the existing trail that was built, at the time it was built, it was actually still private land because Weldwood was only half the width. So with that first subdivision that took place where the highway actually wasn't even dedicated through there. The Weldwood Road was also widened to the standard 20-meter width. The trail that was built through there now actually falls on Ministry of Transportation lands. Regarding the parking that is proposed, like Jim says, it's there will be parking, but the details will come out with the PLR with discussions with the ministry. Okay. The ministry does not want anyone crossing the roads. That was hence we came up with what's already been done was getting that parking, larger parking area and on the south side of the highway.
Yeah, I understand it'll be moved quite a ways closer to the water than it is right now. Right now, it's right up at the highway.
Exactly, yeah.
Yeah, so this here, let's assume this portion of the road, the ministry will require that portion of the road to be developed to get to the access point. And the thought is the parking will go right here at the end of the public roadway that's built out. Right. So the trail width or the trail length will actually be roughly half of what it is now. Right.
Okay. That's all I have right now. So.
Just a quick question. I will move on. The purple area identified on in the top portion of the of the drawing. What does the purple in it? Is it a covenant?
No, that purple area, it's just a different land use designation under the OCP for institutional. So there's been discussions about that going to the regional district, being purchased by the regional district. We're looking at like the green and parkland, that's parkland that's or land given to the regional district for parkland. The area magenta, it would not be parkland, it would be designated, well, it is designated as institutional, and the discussions right now are if that is for fire hall.
Yeah, I know it's in the report that's later. I just wanted for people looking. So Director Gisborne.
Yeah, I think oh, sorry. I heard something about like boat launch access. Is that the area in Grail?
Well, there's presently a boat launch on the property right down here. And at this point, we don't know if we'd be putting in a dock at all. So it would just be, there's really no reason to pull out the boat launch. So we would just have a paved area so that the locals in that area can actually launch a small boat if they wanted to.
Okay.
So it's really a private boat launch.
It's the old existing concrete one
Yeah.
that was there from when it was logged on.
Yeah. And the reason I bring that up is, as you're probably aware, we don't have many great boat launches.
Yeah.
Other than from essentially the municipality all the way to the Sultry Bay launch, which is in dire need of repair. And I'm just wondering, you know, in the future, because you know how folks are in this community are, is that they may say, hey, you're not allowed to use this unless you're a resident, but yet residents will still just show up and
Yeah. See, presently though, anything under a 5-foot tide, you're not getting a boat out of the bay. So it just opening it up to the public just makes no sense. You'd be dredging the bay. So, yeah. So really, they're going to be launching a 12 or 14-foot boat and heading out fishing for the morning.
yeah, that makes sense. It's relatively sheltered, but also fairly muddy.
Yeah.
And I guess my other question is, in the current OCP, there is a strip of land designated as park. And I believe the recommendation is, you know, supporting it, but with changing the official community plan to remove that parkland dedication. And I'm just wondering, like, reason for that. Was it because, you know, you would be able to get 15 lots, you could only get 14 with extra parkland dedication, or just kind of curious about that.
Which strip is that?
Right along here.
Oh, that was, Laura would probably be able to speak to this better. The previous owners of the land were in discussion with the regional district. This is just our understanding, but
Right.
previous owners of the land were looking at development concepts at the time when the existing OCP was adopted. And for some reason, they wanted those areas shown as parkland. There's actually kind of a problem with the OCP in showing privately owned areas as parkland, as a land use designation. Parkland is for the public. So anyway, this is clearing that up. Part of this, and Laura will be able to speak to this more, but part of the recommendations from planning is that make the OCP amendments to clean those types of things up in this area.
Okay.
Yeah, and that's what we'll do when we get on to that point of business in the report, because it'll flush all that good stuff out.
And then I guess my very last question is, I notice on the 15 lot subdivision, there's a lot of hooks on those properties where the parcel is on both sides of that shared strata road. And I'm just wondering, like, the reasoning behind that, rather than trying to say amalgamate lots on one side versus the other side.
Well, it's basically keeping to the minimum of 1 hectare. So the lots below the road are all less than a hectare. So we believe that that's where the septic systems will all go in the back of the properties. They are hooked that way, but that's just to keep them at that minimum size because of the septic system and the well systems.
Okay.
Yeah.
We rolled it and forget that the road alignment right now follows well with the topography. There is an existing, that's actually an extension. logging rail. As far as having the physical thing in that location, that makes sense from a design and safety perspective.
I think page 15 of 35 and shows that well, the topography. And in interest of time, thanks. I want to move to President McCormick for this layer hand.
Very quick question. I just wondered, who maintains the dock?
That would be the Strata group. And there is no dock now.
The launching round.
Yeah. Right now, it's a slab of concrete. There's no.
Yeah, don't put that word out.
Okay,
Yeah, no
okay,
dock.
so- But it is used as a launching round.
It's not used right now, like
Yeah, it's not used, yeah, but the intention is for it to be used
Could
for a
be.
small boat launching ramp.
And that becomes part of the strata.
part of the Strata.
Thanks very much. And obviously you're going to attend to this business a little later. You're welcome to stay till the end when there's a question and answer period, but you don't have to stick around. So we'll be addressing this sooner than later. Thank you. Thank you. So we'll move on. We do have another person listed, Noland Germain, resident of Area B, about the Nootka Street zoning bylaw. Come on forward, Noland. Don't be afraid. Thanks.
Thank you, everyone. Yeah, so my wife and I are the owners of the lot up on Yaroshuk that we had a rezoning application here before you that Director Gisborne on 9.3, I think, you got added.
Yes, 9.3 for reconsideration.
Thank you for doing that. I just wanted to come here and give you some context, explain what was happening, and address some concerns I think that were raised at the previous meeting when it was defeated. And ask for reconsideration, and if I could answer any more questions. We were quite confused, so we wanted to make sure everything's clarified. So quick background is we received a letter of enforcement over a year ago, I think now. In that letter, we got the application form inviting us to rezone to bring it up to compliance. We went through that whole process. We put up the big sign. We went door to door to all of our neighbors with handouts from the district. We highlighted the zoning bylaw, explained what we were doing. All the neighbors were very supportive. The whole neighborhood was very in agreement with this. So then that took a while, and eventually it came to that meeting where it was discussed and defeated. So yeah, so it looked to us like there was some concerns about consistency, I think, and also with a sense of urgency. I wanted to give the context that there is urgency to this. There is a real person living in that house for the last 2 years. That's his only place to live. He's now got serious housing insecurity because of this. There's a moratorium you guys passed on enforcement for 1 year. So now he's asking questions like, should I start downsizing my stuff? Do I start looking for another place to live now? I don't know what to tell him. Do I evict him in a year? Or do we tell him to stay? There is urgency to this. It's really stressful living in a place where the district can evict him at any, well, I have to evict him, but the district, you guys could not hear our application again. I don't know what happens next. So it's really stressful situation for that. In terms of consistency, we are consistent with the OCP. We're consistent with the moratorium that you guys passed. And I don't think there's been any opposition. Like we watched the meetings. The board hasn't received any complaints, I think, from the public. There's no indication of that. No one's opposed to it. It seems in alignment with everything you want to do. You want to rezone, like blanket the entire Nootka, fix it up and allow secondary suites. But I'm just confused what it's not consistent with. The vision going forward is to allow more housing. The moratorium is there. It's most of the rest of the neighborhood is like this. It's consistent with everything like that. Yeah. So I guess the question is like, what does not allowing our rezoning accomplish at the cost of this housing insecurity for this tenant? And what happens next? We fully support that blanket rezoning that you guys are looking at. I love that. I don't know what the timeline is for that. It could be a year, it could be more. So I would really ask that we consider this rezoning now to fix this housing insecurity right now, and then we can look forward at rezoning everything later. Does that make sense? If I could answer anything more, I would love to. About all the context.
It's very, very clear, I think, and first of all, just appreciate what it takes to come before the board or anybody and explain what, you know, your feelings on it, so appreciate that. Obviously, we probably have some questions, directors. You know, we're supposed to be allowed to ask questions and not the other way around, but Director Guzman.
Sorry. I have one question. Were you aware of the zoning bylaws restrictions on dwelling units before or after the secondary accessory dwelling unit was constructed?
I have to say we're aware.
Well, but were you aware before constructed the accessory dwelling unit?
Yes.
So I guess my follow-up question is, why not apply for a rezoning before doing the construction that would take you out of compliance?
Because it seemed like the district was turning a blind eye to everything in the neighborhood. That was, I mean, it's, I want this to be like a public sort of, yeah, you know what I mean? And with the other examples raised at that meeting, there was 3 of those letters sent out, and the resolution to the other ones was like, we were the only ones who took the form that was mailed to us. You gave us the form, we filled it out, we did the whole process, and now it seems like we're being told no, even though it's in alignment with everything you want, and there's no opposition to it. I don't know what we did wrong there.
That's my question.
Other directors? I think you made, you know, your case clear. We've been able to get it onto the agenda. If you're willing to wade through all the other material, you know, we'll be glad to address it.
Yeah, if it's helpful, I wait till 9.3. Is that, I can answer questions then? Is that helpful at all?
I think it may be. And you've been very clear, so it's up to you.
I will definitely stay for that.
Up to you. Okay. Thank you. Appreciate your presentation.
Thank you, everyone.
Okay. All right. I don't see any unfinished business on the agenda. 6 point, we have 2 pieces of correspondence. Anyone want to raise any of these? I am going to raise 6.1, so that'll be 7.2, I believe. Sorry, 7.1.
No.
No, we have a 7.1.
Oh, okay.
I am keeping track, so that's good. Don't try to confuse me.
7.2, got it.
Yeah, great, thank you. Thanks for that. And so we will move on to, if nothing else, we'll move to section 7. So 7.1, Director McCormick.
Thank you, Chair. You all received this notice, which is in the very last page.
The very last.
Yes, as an FYI item. And I really appreciate you moving this up to correspondence because it is a very time-sensitive issue. What the notice says is that the mining company is asking permission from the provincial government to continue, that means they're already doing it, of course, continue their discharge of effluent into the Venanda watershed. This is really concerning, not only for the people and their drinking water, but certainly for the western painted turtle and also for the habitat of the stickleback, which exists in 3 lakes in total in the world. And this is one of them. The stickleback have been under study by UBC, which has been examining the process of evolution. And it has led to a lot of key findings in the area of environment influencing evolution. The stickleback are fish that were saltwater fish that got caught up when the glaciers came. And when the glaciers receded, they were caught in lakes that were surrounded by land, no access to the water. And so they morphed from a saltwater fish to a freshwater fish. And it's that process of evolutionary development that has so intrigued the scientists at UBC. Now, this is a gold mine. There are 2 sites involved, but it's only the U site that really creates the problem. What it does is discharge 470 cubic meters of effluent per day into the Venanda watershed. And although they say in the notice that it is downstream of the water intake for Venanda, the community of Venanda, in fact, the water in traveling between the Turtle Pond, which is Emily Lake, and Priest Lake, the culvert, the water flows both ways. It isn't just flowing it from one direction to another. The water easily flows both ways and does regularly. And so regardless of the statement that the actual discharge is upstream, or rather downstream of the water intake, in fact, because the water goes both ways in that area, that means that this is indeed contaminating the watershed, the turtle habitat, and the stickleback habitat. One of the key elements that's discharged in gold mining is arsenic. And there is concern, of course, that arsenic could be going into not only the drinking water, but the stickleback. And if there were 5 lakes with stickleback, 2 of them have sort of expired, the fish are gone. And this is one of only 3 remaining. So it's considered a very highly endangered species. I don't know what arsenic or whatever is in the discharge is doing to the watershed and to the drinking water, because the notice was only received last week on the 20th of March. It was hand delivered to the improvement district. I guess I got wind of it within about 20 minutes after it was hand delivered. And so I've asked that it go on today's agenda, because you will see from reading the letter that there is an opportunity for comment for 30 days from the date that the notice was posted. That was March the 20th. That takes us to April the 19th. So there's no other opportunity to get this and then get it to the board in time to write a response. So thank you for getting it on the agenda. It's come as quite a surprise to, the people who value Emily Lake and the forest and the natural surroundings there, and certainly the people who care about the wildlife. Not to mention the people in Venanda whose drinking water is potentially affected. They say it's being monitored, but I don't know who monitors the monitoring. Like, we don't know what those results are, and I don't know how to find out what those results are. So that concerns me as well. So all of that put together, the request, Chair, is that the board write a letter of concern to the provincial authority who is listed in the document. And that is why I'm bringing this to the board and to planning committee. So
you're making the motion to write the letter?
I would move it. Yes, I would so move. Yes.
Okay, do we have a seconder for that? Thank you, Director Brander. And we'll try to let our CAO keep track of the motion as well.
That we write a letter of concern to the provincial.
Rest of it. Thank you. Okay. And yes.
I will speak.
Director, what was your name for?
Paul, who's not on the planning committee, but can speak. I just want to clarify why these fish are so special, because there are stickleback across the coast, and they're all special because they're, as Director McCormick identified, they're landlocked. They become their own species in areas, and certain areas of the province, especially Haida Gwaii, have a lot of species of stickleback that are endemic. But these stickleback on Texada are extra special because they're not just another species of stickleback. They're called a species pair. And what a species pair is actually 2 species that have co-evolved. One is benthic, meaning they live at the bottom of the lake in the kind of murky water at the bottom, and one's pelagic, where they're in the water column. And they've co-evolved and they stratify. So they're codependent, they stay in their own zone, and they go together. If one goes, they both go, or the other one evolves into something else. So they're actually codependent. There used to be at least one of the lakes was on Lasqueti Island, one of the 5. So each stickleback pair, by the way, is also a separate set of species. The ones on Lasqueti were different than the ones in Emily Lake because, of course, how could they interact? They're not exactly sharing genetic material. But the one on Lasqueti, the pair on Lasqueti went extinct. They haven't found it. It's in one of the lakes. When you've been on Lasqueti, it's the Pete's Lake there. It's a Hadley Lake, it's called. There used to be there. It's been modified. It had
well, it doesn't say confidential, so I'm going to open it and log it in our
some invasive species entered the lake, I believe is what caused them to go extinct, but they were extirpated. So they're really rare, they're really special, and they're really unique. They're not like, you know, because people might say there's other sticklebacks. These are not just any sticklebacks, they're extra special sticklebacks. They're extra rare. I mean, they're unique globally. They're unique globally. So these three lakes that have them, three separate pairs, and people study them because they're really a unique evolutionary process that makes them special and sensitive. So, you know, there aren't many, and, you know, one mistake can cause them to disappear and you don't get it back. So I just wanted to add that little bit of insight.
Wow. I mean, we just got educated here, right? And what it just proves to me is we get sometimes a lot of correspondence comes through our way. And this is an example, one that could be, you know, just down at the bottom of a report. And if we're not doing our jobs as directors, paying attention, bringing it up, I had some questions when I saw it, but you identified them. Interesting, when you start digging, you just find out more that you want to know about. They're also applying lime. What does that tell you? pH is changing. So, I mean, there's, you know, the more you dig and the more, so really for us and for people watching, we're advocating our citizens to pay attention, find out the information, and speak up when you see stuff that you want to speak up about. Anyone else on this?
Yeah, I'm all in support of sending a letter. When I got this, there's not a lot of information on this notice. So big thank you to Director McCormick for bringing this up, and of course Director Fall for clarifying the paired species of stickleback. But when we send this letter off, hopefully we'll get some more information back from the ministry about like there's not even a map here. So it seems one of those things of just like, oh yeah, everything's fine. We'll just give you the notice because we're required to, as we got a lot more concerns. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Appreciate that. Okay, we'll move on now. So I guess my 7 point. Oh, I'm sorry. Thank you for that. Here, see now. All those in favor of the motion before us. It was carried. Thank you. All right, now to 7.2. Fourth one at 6.1. Really, this is about short-term rentals. Our staff is getting quite a few calls on this, I think, and emails. I'm seeing a lot of them. And really, there's a request in here. This is from someone on Savary about, please, can you tell me how this initiative, which is a provincial government initiative, applies to Savary Island, but it also applies to our other areas. So can we maybe ask staff to quickly explain the gist of what is being asked by the province, and then where they can find information if they want more. That's right.
Sure. I can do just a quick high-level explanation. So the province has instituted a registration system for short-term rentals. And so all booking agencies, Airbnb, all the online booking agencies are required to have any of their clients that are listing accommodations be registered with the province. So all of those people have received notification that this is happening and that they need to register. And we have been receiving quite a few calls in the planning department. And of course, regional district doesn't regulate short-term rentals. So we just direct people to the provincial website where all the information is. There's cost savings if people register for a certain date. I don't remember what it is right now, but
thank you. That's the gist of it. Again, we get a lot of correspondence. We don't want to let people know that we're trying to, again, advocate for the BC ministries that are putting these expectations. Appreciate that. Thank you. Any questions on that one? Okay, thanks. We get to move on to reports now. Our first report is right up my alley. 8.1 is the assessment of groundwater resources on Kaikwan, Savary Island. And if you've been paying any attention, that's a crucial piece of information that we've been looking forward to. So I believe there's a slide deck and maybe a presentation, Ms. Rodden. Good to start there.
Through the chair, I'll just make a brief presentation. I think the report speaks for itself. It is a very comprehensive document.
Yes.
Prepared by GW Solutions, but it is a foundational document for our official community plan update on Savary Island. And the protection of groundwater is a central focus of the current plan that's 20 years old. And it was based on a groundwater study that was done in 1996, 30 years ago. So that was the rationale for having an updated study done. And Sylvia Barossa has been working with us to complete that study, and she has a presentation for you.
Awesome. Thanks, Sylvia. Go right ahead.
Thank you, Laura, for this introduction. Is there, am I meant to share my screen? Is that?
Yeah, if you can.
Yes.
I think we have it if you have trouble.
Bear with me, and then I will do, oh, that's
Yep.
not.
There we go.
And so I'm just going to make it into presenter view.
And show us all your notes if you like.
Is that switch? I need to switch, no?
You're good. You're good.
Okay, so you can see the present, the slides just as it is? Yes. Okay, good. Thank you very much, and for this opportunity to come and speak with you today. I was really pleased to be one of the primary researchers involved in this study. To begin with, we're referring to Savary Island or Kayaquan, which is within the unceded territory of the Tla'amin Nation. And the nation and their ancestors have been the stewards of these lands since time immemorial. Kayaquan was named for the freshwater springs that are present on the island. And so it was interesting, part of this project that we wanted to reuse some of the traditional place names and to replace some of the older, more antiquated names that are no longer appropriate within the context of today's context of reconciliation. So in particular, pointing to the west side of the island, we've been referring to it as Thaddeus or broken off. So this slide gives an overview of the scope and timeline of the project. In the first phase of the study, we compiled all of the information that was available from historical reports. We reached out to members of the community and a local water service provider. We did a resident survey, online resident survey. And from that, we got, and from community contacts, we connected with community-based volunteers, property owners that would allow us to collect information as part of the field data collection program. And we prepared a three-dimensional hydrogeologic model of the island and its aquifers. In phase 2, we completed an assessment of groundwater quantity and quality hazards on the island. We developed a water balance for the island, looking at the water availability from precipitation and how that contributed to recharge, and compared that to water demand that was based on local understanding of water use patterns based on the data that we received from Savary Shores Improvement District. We assessed the impacts of climate change on the water balance and considered different land use scenarios for future water availability. We looked at the vulnerability of the aquifer to contamination from activities in the land surface and assessed the seawater intrusion hazard and impact. And then lastly, we developed recommendations for monitoring and protection of the island aquifers as part of the official community plan and other activities such as well owner education. So looking at Savary Island population, it varies very significantly. There's probably from around 70 to 100 permanent full-time residents, but the population can increase up to 3,000 people in the summer period. Based on the previous study by David Tupper in 1996 and our current field verification, we validated 233 field validated wells in comparison to the Provincial G-Wells database, which suggested there were 90 wells on the island. But through our analysis of land use patterns and developed lots, we estimate that there could be as many as 400 additional unregistered wells on the island, which is a significant density of wells and septics. The main water source on the island is wells, with the exception of private wells, and each lot has their own well and septic system, with the exception of the Savary Shores Improvement District, which is outlined in blue, and which has production wells, and they provide water service. The field assessment component was a critical piece to make sure that our study was more than just another desktop study. We wanted to make sure that the analysis was based on current conditions and current understanding of what was happening in the groundwater on the island. So as I mentioned, reaching out through community contacts and volunteers, we were able to complete 5 days of intensive field work in September 2024. We collected spatial coordinates and documented details of different water sources at 77 sites. We measured water levels and collected field water quality parameters at numerous sites, including pH, temperature, electrical conductivity, which is an indicator of salinity, and total dissolved solids. We conducted some downhole salinity profiles or measurements and wells that were at risk or showing evidence of saltwater intrusion, and we collected samples for laboratory analysis of geochemical quality, including at 28 wells at the Katakwan Spring and 2 ocean water samples for comparison. Looking at the results now of the water quality and quantity assessment, first off, looking at the water balance, the setup of the island is that groundwater is recharged through diffuse infiltration of rainfall across the footprint of the island. Whether or not water infiltrates into the groundwater or runs off is affected by the slope of the land and the characteristics of the soil. We estimate that current water use represents about 7% of annual recharge to the aquifer, which in itself is not a source of concern. It's not a high level of water stress. We also recognize that water use on the island is low in comparison to Canadian averages, averaging around 100 liters per day per household or per lot in winter, up to 400 liters per day per lot in summer. And that's based again on the Savary Shores Improvement District data analysis. But there is a seasonal deficit. So there's a long period of time when there's no groundwater recharge. So all of the water used during the summer period has to come from storage in the aquifer. And there is a higher water demand and seasonal stress anticipated with different growth scenarios for the community. Annual precipitation, or considering climate change impacts, annual precipitation may, based on current models, may increase slightly, but the precipitation is going to be received over a much shorter period, and there's going to be a longer period of no recharge and no precipitation. There also is expected to be increased risk of hazards such as seasonal drought, seawater intrusion, and wildfire. In terms of aquifer vulnerability, we know that Savary Island is a permeable sand unit. It's highly vulnerable to contamination at the land surface. And based on our measurements of groundwater level, there's very shallow groundwater levels in some areas, in particular on the West Island. And so there's very little attenuation of pollutants that enter into the ground surface. In terms of water quality in most wells is very good and meets drinking water quality guidelines. There are some occurrences of contaminants, natural contaminants such as iron and manganese and arsenic, which are common in this area. Nitrate and chloride above background in some areas indicate where septic systems are impacting the groundwater quality. And we do see an increasing nitrate trend in some areas. While the results are still below drinking water guidelines, we recognize there are some potential health impacts of long-term use of water even below the drinking water limits based on current studies. In terms of well construction and maintenance, most wells met groundwater protection regulation guidelines, but we recognize the importance and some issues with respect to bentonite surface seals, which prevent contaminant inflow along the well casing, and setbacks of contaminant sources from well water sources, in particular fuel and such as generators. And we think that well owners would definitely benefit from education and support for well testing and septic system maintenance. Our online survey showed that only or approximately 44% of well owners had never tested their water quality, and 30% of septic owners had never done any septic system maintenance. So definitely more support and education to help with encouraging people to do that type of work and know what the water quality that they're drinking and the steps to take to protect their water supply is really important. In terms of hazards, seawater intrusion is definitely the most significant hazard for water sources on the island. The island has a very, very thin lens of fresh water overlying the transition zone of brackish water, and then below that seawater. So measures need to be taken to reduce excessive drawdown within the aquifer and excessive water use, and also well drilling. Well, drillers and pump installers play a role in not installing wells too deep into the subsurface and intersecting that transition zone. I think I probably don't have enough time to get into the dynamics of what's happening in the island aquifer, and I hope that we have an opportunity to present to the community the results of the study in a more in-depth manner. But in general, what I said, there's a shallow freshwater lens at max about 3 meters above sea level, and then below that the freshwater lens, and then transitions into saline zone. That transition zone moves up and down, and then there's also potential impacts with climate change, in particular sea level rise, and then potential impacts of water overuse. In terms of recommendations, some positive things: groundwater monitoring. The island has 2 permanent provincial observation wells and 1 unofficial observation well, and we recommend that monitoring continue at those sources, and also that there are opportunities to be sought to engage and activate community volunteers or staff on the island to help with capacity to continue monitoring at those locations, or expansion of the monitoring network. Well owner education and property owner education around water conservation, water testing, septic system maintenance are critical. And I think that it's really important that we present the results of this study to the community, and that the regional district can continue to support those education pieces. And the province Ministry of Water, Land and Resource Stewardship has a role to play in terms of compliance and enforcement of the groundwater protection regulation, in particular with this looking at the sanitary seal installation and preparation, for example, of seawater intrusion hazard or advisory for the island, I think would be a good option. And then looking at sort of the planning and the role of regional district, rural water sources and independent water sources are still a really important part of a water supply. And some other regional districts, such as Regional District of Nanaimo and the Southern Gulf Islands, have some amazing programs, educational programs and support programs for rural well owners and rural property owners to look at water supply options for their properties, and to provide education and a strategic planning piece around drinking water and watershed protection. So I think that there's some great examples out there, and I think that it's wonderful that Catholic Regional District have taken the initiative to undertake this study and to do this planning at this time. We also really want to thank Laura Rodden from QRD and the many community members, folks with knowledge, local knowledge, and who assisted us in the field and gave us information, and the well owners that allowed us to access their properties and collect information. So thank you for your time today.
Well, thank you, Ms. Barroso. I'll ask any directors for questions, or I do mine. Go ahead, Director Gisborne. Oh, I've just anticipated it. All right, well, I'll go then. I really appreciate this, and the slide deck is super helpful. And what I will say is, people aren't waiting to digest the information, so it's already spreading, which is great. Obviously, there's a lot of attention on the Savary OCP. I got a text on my way into this meeting, so I'm going to ask the questions so that I can show that we're being responsive. Pretty good question, really. Your projections in scenarios that you've used with the data you found hold if the island is deforested. So that's the concept about, okay, we're, these concepts of our carrying capacity and otherwise are affected by future activities, whether it's natural or otherwise. Maybe any comments on that?
Definitely, like I did sort of in a qualitative way try to look or think about what the potential impact of deforestation would be. It is complex, but definitely any change in land use is going to affect the infiltration patterns and the ability of contaminants to enter the land surface. Deforestation may result in short-term increase in groundwater recharge. So there's less evapotranspiration from vegetative cover, but then also the slope stability aspects and in particular could be impacted significantly by deforestation. So trying to retain that tree cover and such is likely a good idea for the island.
Thanks. And I think just the second question the same person asked me is, I think it's more actually to get people thinking even more with this new information. Any other things the community can do to reduce the risk to nature and water. Water is nature. And I think that's kind of an open-ended question, but I think it's more for the community as we move ahead with the Savary OCP and with some of the ideas that you'd have identified here that we can take action on. So I'm not really asking you for an answer there, but I think it's more incumbent upon us to think about the answers to that. And I did want to acknowledge, and you mentioned it in your report, the in-kind contributions on page 6 of the report. And that's a big thing. And you mentioned everybody from Tla'amin to homeowners and that participating. Those people are participating. They are volunteering information and their time and effort. So it just shows you that. So thanks to all those folks. And the recommendations on page 9 are a foundation, right, that we're going to use with the Savary OCP process. But I think it relates to our other islands and our other locations about some of the same impacts that we have. And your report just once again it reminded me that Savary's like this slice of sand in the ocean that I look at, right? And so I really appreciate your presentation. So thank you. And you will be hearing from the advisory committee and others probably very shortly. We're confirming some dates to get back to work. So
that's great. Thank you so much. And one, if I might jump back to your comment about nature and one of the things that we weren't able to fully examine as part of this study, but something that should be acknowledged is that the groundwater not only provides water to the wells and sources on the island, but also provides a flux to the foreshore. And in no doubt in my mind that it is important ecological role, that brackish water or that mixing zone and those areas of groundwater recharge in the foreshore are likely to be ecological zones along the margin of the island. And so it's something that we just didn't have the time or ability to examine in more detail, but it should be recognized that that groundwater flux is an important piece for foreshore water quality.
Yeah, thank you. And I think that as soon as you started describing it, it intuitively makes sense to people. So I think that's important as well. I just a couple other points. Up to 400 unregistered wells, not entirely surprising to me, just anecdotally. But I think that's also a discussion for the community about how they handle that going forward. Increased nitrate levels, again, that's telling me septic is involved in at least washing machines and other products. So thank you for that. And then this talk about, how we handle our fuel storage and septic. So really your points on education hit home. We're already hearing from the community that we can do more to educate people who are coming to the island. And it's not just residents, it's very much so the tourism-based impact that we have as well. So I thank you for this and we'll be chatting soon. Thank you. Okay.
So much for the opportunity.
Right on. So we'll keep moving on here. So 8.2, I believe, didn't make any changes. Oh, sorry, motion.
Move the recommendation in the package.
Moving too fast. Seconded by Director McCormick. Thank you. And
a comment and maybe a question for the chair. I think so the Islands Trust has a water specialist, William Schulba, and he's been looking at the Islands Trust looks at a lot of different conditions, and you know, the Savary Island is obviously very different from E Island. E Island's kind of a nugget, but there are a number of other islands in the Islands Trust area that may be similar, maybe not entirely as sandy as Savary, but gravelly at least. Denman, maybe there's some that are similar. So I guess the question really is, would it be appropriate to include collaboration, sharing information on recommendations at the annual meetings we have with the Islands Trust? And maybe the chair would like to attend for Savary, because I think this information is really good. And the Islands Trust has done similar studies, you know, lenses and, you know, infiltration, all these things are looked at. Everyone's looking at it. Of course, that's important. So maybe there could be some lessons learned and maybe some recommendations for OCPs, but also education and so on. Maybe there's a information sharing and even cost savings for leveraging.
Thank you. I appreciate that. And I'm sure, you know, I know that our staff is working with all different agencies to try to gather as much information that's relevant to this topic. But if you have a specific invite to those, I'm
sure they would appreciate,
consider this reciprocal,
you know.
Yes,
but then they might sharing and then sifting through for the.
Do you have a specific motion that you need, or do you want to wait until you
I
work with the group?
And I mean, usually it comes up annually. There's a question out of what should be on the topic. So I think I'll just keep it in mind. I think,
Great idea. Appreciate that. Thank you. Did we vote? Yeah. Thank you. I see. I didn't move too quickly.
I diverted the attention.
But thank you, Director Fall. Any other comments or questions? No. So all those in favor of receipt? Thank you. That's carried. All right, now we can carry on. So we are back to the 15 lot Bear Strata subdivision, 1480, 1824 in Electoral. You see there is a recommendation here with several points. Proof of water and septic, qualified professional site level assessment of slope and flood, statutory right of way proposed that we saw earlier. And the applicant provides dedicated parkland. So we started to sort of talk about that, but we can get more specifics on that if we need. And then the official community plan, which we talked about earlier today too. So we have a recommendation.
Thanks, Chair. I'd like to move the recommendation, but with the optional number 4, so that applicant can move land dedication. Okay, thanks. It may seem strange coming from me to not be excited about the concept of picking up parkland, but getting parkland, it's not just about getting parkland, it's about getting the right parkland. And I know the area quite well. In fact, I was down there just yesterday taking some photos. And I don't know if anybody is particularly interested, but I could share my screen right now if
Do we have that technology?
Have them.
I've got it here too, so I can just.
I have them ready.
Oh, okay, thank you. Okay.
Yeah, there we go.
There we go. So we explain away.
Well, this is the one for the 15 lot, the one closer to the water. This is the land on the western side of Wolfson Bay there. And as you can see, it is chock-a-block with wild rose, with broom, with blackberry, with all sorts of invasive species. And it's a good portion of the property is covered with this. There are a few trees, a few cedars, a few hemlock, maples, but nothing of any great size. If you want to go on to the next photo. I advance that, or sure if you advance that.
I have to open up my own sheet there.
Okay. That's me, I guess.
Your cursor?
That's your cursor. You can go.
Okay. All right. Well, new to this sort of thing.
Well, this hey, we're in an adventure now, so we'll see.
Yeah,
We'll get there.
we go. This just shows more of the brush. You can continue on one more if you would, please. This is where the creek is coming out, and it's the path. There is a small path there that people use. It's starting to slough off into the water. Next photo, please. This shows the area, a lot of the area that actually is above water right now, but you can see from where the driftwood is that in higher tides and especially in storm surges, this whole area is covered with water. So it's not usable space by any means. So even though it looks like an open space, it is right now, but in many times it's underwater. If you want to progress to the next one, again, it shows where, whoop, back one. Again, there's the driftwood, and immediately after the driftwood is where the blackberries and the invasive species start. So looking at this space, like it certainly has value. I think it probably has value more in an environmental sense, but as far as a parkland or a useful space, I would think it would take hundreds of thousands of dollars of work to clear it and get it to a point where it actually is usable. And I think for the residents of Area C, the money that could come in cash in lieu would be of more value to potentially have a community park that would be in a more desirable location. If we go on to the next photo, this is where we're going to the, and I know, I guess I'm getting ahead of myself, but since we're here, I might as well go to it. But this is the lot on the high side of the highway. So this is behind the salmon hatchery. And you have to go through the salmon hatchery to get to that green space that is being proposed as parkland. And the creek is very pretty and all that, but it is very high banked waterfront. If you go to the next shot, this shows the path to get through there, and we could only go so far because it's so muddy and so slippery and it's pretty treacherous. So again, to develop this to a point where it could be usable, I think would require a lot of effort and probably quite a significant amount of money. Go to the next one. Again, it just shows more of the high bank, and also there's some proposed parkland dedication on the other side of the creek, but there's no access to it. So there's no bridge over to it, and there's a road right of way, but it's not developed whatsoever. There's not a trail on it or anything. So keep going on. Again, another shot of the trail, and you can see how the steep banks are along this section. So I just think there are probably better ways or better spaces to use as parkland than these two spaces, and that money could go towards, again, like I said, a more useful location.
Okay.
So that's why, I appreciate the generosity of proposing these spaces, but I just think that.
Thank you. Yeah,
places out.
maybe just before we take any other questions on the amendment, my last staff, just within the report, I'm looking at page 1535. Is that the right map to be looking at what's proposed? Like, just so we're looking at the right, what's proposed versus, and I know we have some maps over there as well. So I just want to make sure that for anybody, for the directors and for myself, what is proposed parkland in what our report. Thanks, Ms. Rodney.
We can share, yes, page 15.
Okay. So that's the lower piece, right?
Yeah. That's the item 8.2.
Yes, thank you. And in the legend there, I think it shows the different colors. So you can see green would be parkland. So that's what you're referring to.
Yes, it is. And I also wanted to point out that the Brew Bay water system has their facility on the property as well.
Yes, so there's an easement there for that.
Yeah.
Any other discussion, Director Gisborne?
Yeah, I'd like to thank Director Brander for pointing out some of the issues on the proposed parkland. And I guess I'm a little confused because a number of years ago, we had a subdivision proposal on Centennial, and there was a piece of property next to the creek that was not designated as parkland. And when I tried to get it as parkland, I was told that it has to be like in the OCP if we're going to ask for it. But now we're hearing today that, that's kind of not really the way to go. So when hearing, about this motion and the area on the west side being turned down for parkland, and I'm thinking about this specific proposed subdivision and which area would actually be nice for a community park. And I think about all the folks that use the Mahoots Beach and the parking that's been brought up and things like, toilets and stuff like that, which, could actually prevent people from going onto private property and doing their business. And I'm wondering if, rather than asking for cash in lieu, could we potentially ask for, I guess it's like the two half of the 0.5 hectare lots on the southeast end, which would be right next to Weldwood Road, because then that would, you know, allow for either for greater parking and washroom facilities and things like that in the future. Could we potentially go with that direction? And just to say that, yes, invasive species like blackberries and stuff like that are kind of a barrier. Though some of those pictures look like how my farm used to look before I let my pigs on it, but I don't think you can do that in the riparian area.
Thank you. Any other questions on the amendment? I'm going to add my voice in the concept that I do appreciate actually the thought that goes into providing dedicated parkland. I don't see it a lot. Like, I'll just be honest, and since I've been in my role for 2.5 years, we don't get the opportunity to have somebody say, hey, this could actually work. So I appreciate what Director Brander's getting at, that this may not be the solution, but I'd hate to give up the concept of getting that dedication. So I guess my question may be to staff about if we were to vote this amendment, we've sort of already decided we're not going to work anymore on parkland. Does that make sense? Can we remove that particular subject from the motion on its own? So I'm just wondering for some guidance on how we could maybe continue to work on parkland along the constraints that we've sort of identified with this piece. Strata?
Through the chair, I believe that I heard Director Brander table an alternate by replacing condition 4 with the provision of cash in lieu of parkland.
So we'd have to vote on that and then proceed from there. Is that what you mean?
Well, that's what I heard. So I think that's what we're talking about, either accepting what's being proposed as park dedication or cash in lieu.
Yeah, and that's exactly why I'm bringing it up again, because we're at a decision point now whether we're going to accept this or the amendment. So our directors to
amendment though. Mine's not an amendment.
Okay.
Mine's the main motion.
yes.
Thank you. I think Director Gisborne was.
That's okay. It's your first goal.
Okay, so I'm kind of where you are, Chair, with respect to having parkland in what is clearly a very special location that is already well used by the public. So I'm just wondering, part of this is maybe a question to Director Brander, and maybe part of it is to staff, but is there a way to reconfigure that site to make, you know, the access ways work? And how big a deal would that be? I respect that you're the area director for this area, and I respect that you know the area far better than I, but is there a way to make that space work? It's just a shame to give it up.
Yeah, thank you. And that is what I was getting at. I said just now, if, you know, obviously we're getting into a significant possible change. We could postpone this issue and let our staff come back to us, because I think they've heard what we're getting at. And I do appreciate that we didn't just kind of carry on and push anything through. So I suggest that we postpone this item. Let staff figure it out. Ms. Rodden, does that work for you? I mean, is that a path that we can take here?
Through the chair, it is a path we could take. I have spoken with the provincial approving officer, and he was okay with extending the response deadline by 1 month to May 15th. So you could consider, I guess, an alternate motion for consideration of subdivisions to the April planning.
Okay. Do you want to make a point, Director Gisborne?
Yes, I'd asked a question, and I guess it was a bit maybe to our assembly, but also I guess it could also be to staff, and I guess I can point at the chart if that's okay. The area I'm referring to, potentially asking for parkland dedication rather than on this side, would be these two half parcels over here, because as was discussed during the presentation, this is where we get a lot of members of the public coming down to use this section of Mahoods Beach. And, you know, folks are going to be trying to park along here. There's not any place for toilets or things like that. And if we were to get, you know, parkland around here, that might be able to actually meet the desires and needs for kind of what's already happening down there. So if we do defer this, could we say add that as a clause to the motion for staff to take a look?
Director Brenner?
I mean, I'm not answering Director Gisborne's question, but maybe a more appropriate way of approaching it is to say, refer it back to staff. And then that would give them an opportunity to work with the developers and have more conversations that way. So we can look at all sorts of options.
And that's where I was gonna go, is motion to refer for those same points.
Sure, I'll move that.
Okay, seconder, Director McCormick. Any other discussion? Go ahead.
I'm just wondering, should we have an amendment to that that also says to ask, to direct staff to inquire about?
I think staff understands what we're getting at and working with the proponent, right? That's the first step, and I think the intention is clear, so.
Okay,
Thank you.
I just think that if we
I
go,
understand, but I think we've been pretty clear about what we're.
might avoid some future headaches.
Appreciate that. So all those in favor? Carried, thank you. Appreciate the discussion. Yeah, the Crows or Ravens aren't happy with us up here, so. So 8.3 is another referral here, 46 lot, 1480 and 8024. The upper piece, Director Brander.
Well, I guess, I mean, I'm gonna move the same thing, but with the same change to the item 4.
You all right, so you're moving that. Do I have a seconder? Director Gisborne, comment?
I've already
Yes.
stated my case.
Anybody else? All right, all those in favor? Carried, thank you. Well done. All right. 8.4 now. This is a 2-lot subdivision, 3632 Gillies Bay Road, Electoral Area D. Director McCormick.
I'll move the recommendation.
You, we have a seconder. Director Brander, discussion. Being none, we'll put it to the vote. All those in favor? That's carried unanimously. Thank you. They all be that easy. 8.5 Development Services Amendment Bylaw. There's a recommendation here that the bylaw be forwarded to the April 8th board meeting for the first reading through adoption. Director Brander's moving, Director Gisborne seconding. Any staff, any information here relevant for folks?
Chair. The requirement to update or amend the bylaw is a result of Bill 44 passed by the province last year, and it provides the ability to waive a public hearing and three simple changes to be in line.
Right, we'll put it to the vote. All those in favor? It's carried unanimously. Thank you. Is that a word? Okay, new business 9.1, Nootka Street zoning bylaw. We have a recommendation here. I think we've seen this one before. It's the request is to be elevated in priority for the planning services list of priorities. Gisborne.
Yes, this is, I guess, 9.1, 9.2, and 9.3 are kind of all related. The motion that we have before us, which hasn't been moved, I guess it's been referred back, is prioritizing the request for a staff report on changing the Nootka Street bylaw for the entire neighborhood. And when that motion was, I guess, passed back in November, I actually voted against having it go to staff for a report, because I would like the planning committee and thus the board to give clear direction as to what is the change that we would like to see up there. And that's, before we really get into it, I'm kind of curious around the table of, do we want to change the Nootka Street zoning bylaw for the whole neighborhood? And just to let folks know, I had a town hall on Sunday and there was a number of folks from Nootka, and I asked the question, how many folks here are satisfied with the current state of the Nootka Street zoning bylaw? And not a single hand was raised. The consensus in the room was the bylaw itself has some inconsistencies with the OCP, and there's also some deficiencies in relation to some of the other activities that are going on up there. I have a few ideas on how to change things, but we could pass this motion, send it to the board to say, hey, we want that staff report about changing the Nootka Street zoning bylaw. But I think that's putting a fair bit of work onto our planning department without the planning committee actually saying what are the changes that we would like to see up there. I actually have a couple of ideas, if that's okay. The first is a very simple one, which is essentially what was in the zoning bylaw change that we looked at, that we ended up turning down, which was to allow accessory dwelling units of 1,200 square feet. And then it would just say, hey, everyone can have an accessory dwelling 1,200 square feet. That brings up some other questions and concerns that I heard in the community, which is like, hey, if someone's already got a really big house, 1,200 square feet is quite large. So one of the concepts that came up was that we could change the bylaw where we authorize accessory dwelling units with a maximum floor area of all residential footprint. So that would be between the main dwelling and the accessory dwelling, having a limit placed on both, but it's kind of like it can slide between which one's more and which one's less. And then the third thing that came up that I've heard from members of the community is a desire to include a separate clause in the bylaw that would restrict the total floor area of non-residential structures, because there's concerns being raised in regards to the commercial storage development in the area, and the purpose of the bylaw is to, quote, preserve the Nootka Street residents' rural lifestyle. If a parcel of land has majority coverage in structures, residential or otherwise, it would not be unreasonable to argue that the parcel is no longer meeting the goals of the OCP. So the item before us right now is, do we pass a motion to ask staff to prioritize getting a staff report on the Nootka Street zoning bylaw? But I have an issue with going that route because I think we need to make our intention fairly clear so that we can actually get some bang for our buck. Otherwise, we're just asking for more reports on reports.
So are you proposing to withdraw this?
I'm wondering what the rest of the planning committee thinks, because I have ideas, but if the rest of the committee won't support it, then it goes nowhere, right?
Well, I think the next two items actually are exactly what you're talking about. Yes, I think we can deal with it, in my mind, when we get to those items. Right?
Well, I'm just kind of curious of which way to go.
Director McCormick.
Thank you, Chair. I'm happy to jump in here. In terms of what the right zoning is for Nootka Street, I don't know the answer to that, and I don't think it's my role to know the answer to that. The part of this that concerns me is that this item be elevated in priority on the work plan. And I believe that is treading oh so quietly, but very distinctly into the realm of operations, and not, what our role is, which is to set the goals and ensure that staff reach them. So I think that while I'm not arguing with Director Gisborne as to what should or shouldn't be the end result, I am opposed to elevating this unless it was an issue of life or death or whatever. I don't see the point. I don't see it as our role to determine the priority in which staff do their work.
I respect, thank you, Director McCormick. I respect what you're saying. I think we're actually in debate here, right? So we need to address what the recommendation is to elevate it or not. So we have a recommendation before us, right? So we're in debate, so let's just do it the right way. Do we have somebody to make that recommendation?
I'll direct the motion so we can.
And seconder, I'll second that. So now we can continue our debate. Thank you. Director Gisborne, did you want to in now?
Not sure if Director McCormick would like to finish.
No, I'm pretty much finished, Chair. Just as I say, I don't know what the right answer is. But I am opposed to the principle in us dictating the priority of after the work.
So just to be clear, that's what we're talking about, elevating.
They're already engaged in the Savary OCP and things.
Yes, they are.
So, yeah.
Okay.
I don't support that part of
it.
Yes, I think it actually is our role to set the priorities for our staff. If something comes up which is an urgent need, it is the role of the board to actually prioritize things and say, the board would like to see this information before the other information. At our board meeting, was a few weeks ago, where we had that workflow go up on the screen, I think there was an item that's still outstanding from 2023. And that's at the top of the outstanding list, and the Nootka Street one is way down at the bottom. So we might end up getting that report in 2026 or 2027, 2028, who knows? We've already heard from a delegation that, we put a moratorium for 1 year, Therefore, I think it is time sensitive that we actually get this done before that moratorium expires. Otherwise, I would look forward to, a moratorium of indefinite, enforcement. And what we've also heard is that there has been other enforcement notices that have gone up to people in the Nootka Street neighborhood. And a lot of them that have gotten those notices have actually decommissioned their accessory dwelling units. We're actually losing housing that was already constructed up there. And my thoughts is the housing crisis is a priority, and that it's the role of this planning committee and this board to set that as a priority for this community. And therefore, I do believe that we should get a report, and maybe that report, when we give that direction, should come with clear direction as to what we want. My thoughts are, is we can say, hey, let's put out a few options, get the staff to come back with, say, amending bylaws or like, hey, this is what it looks like. And then we strike either a working group or some way to actually go out and engage with the Nootka Street neighborhood in official capacity. And then we get some kind of solution, because while we may not know what the solution is, we do recognize there's a problem, and it is our job to come up with a solution. That's why we're here. That's what the planning committee is all about. So I'm not necessarily sure if the right motion is that we just ask for a report. I would be happy with the report if we give our staff clear direction as to what we want.
Yeah, I appreciate that, and that we've been reminding ourselves of that over time, that that's up to us to provide direction. CEO?
Yeah, through the chair, I just want to ask a clarifying question of Laura Rodden. Director Gisborne has indicated there are 3 other enforcement letters out there in that area. Can you clarify what is going on in that area for me, please?
I believe we heard that from the delegate earlier.
Through the chair. We have a bylaw enforcement policy which staff uses, and we only investigate if there's been a complaint. We have had 2 complaints about bylaw non-compliance up in the Nootka Street, not 3. We've had 2. Both property owners, as is standard practice and procedures under our policy, they were provided a letter with options. One property owner chose to decommission their suite because they were using it when they were building their home, and they didn't use it any longer. They could have applied for a rezoning, but they chose not to. The applicant that appeared as a delegation today was given the identical options and chose to apply for a rezoning. So just that is the situation. There isn't a problem. Just been 2 complaints that staff had to investigate under enforcement policy, and that's what happened.
CEO, is that?
Yes.
Thank you. Okay, Director McCormick.
Who issues those? Who's the investigator? Who issues those complaint notices?
Well, Ms. Rodden, who issues the enforcement?
Who's the enforcement?
Policy delegates the manager of planning to investigate any complaints. And I work with staff to do that.
Do you send out the notices?
Yes. And the policy sets out a 3-step process. And these only ever made it to the first step, which was staff send a letter informing the applicant that they're compliant with the zoning. And they're given those choices. The next step, if we don't reach compliance voluntarily with the property owner, is we would prepare a report to the planning committee and seek a direction from the board to send a letter, that the board would send a letter. And if there's still non-compliance reached, then there would be another report to the board, and the board may decide to take the last step, which is court action. But we've only ever reached that on one property in the 12 years I've worked here.
So follow up then, thank you, Chair. Could the board not then also write a letter or notice that enforcement would be on hold until such time as for the future bylaw can be developed? And that might alleviate their fears.
Through the chair, this started as a very simple task. A property owner applied for rezoning. This happens across the province in all jurisdictions on a daily basis. Under the Local Government Act, we are required to have a Development Services Procedures Bylaw, which we have. The board adopted that. And the applicant has worked with us. They have met every requirement under Bylaw 477. One of the requirements was related to being compliant with the OCP, and it was proof of water and septic servicing. They provided that. They met every requirement that we had, and the board accepted their application in November and directed staff to prepare the amending bylaw. We prepared the amending bylaw, and then it was denied at the last meeting. So by all means, I think this application should be reconsidered. And like the board owes a high degree of procedural fairness to the applicant. Any applicant that comes forward is required to be given procedural fairness. And if they meet all the requirements, the RD is acting in bad faith if they deny the application without a valid reason. And I think, you know, while if the desire is to extend the permission of accessory dwelling units to all properties and open up the bylaw, by all means, you have the prerogative to do that, but it should go through the proper public process, like the development or amendment of a bylaw would do. And the board has the ability to do that, but it's two separate processes. This application was very straightforward. And I haven't heard, unless there is a reason I haven't heard, the board needs a valid reason to deny it. And it was just unfortunate at the last meeting that the vote was split. And what that means is the application was denied.
Director Gisborne?
Yes, I believe Director McCormick's question was about the Nootka Street neighborhood in general, not about the individual application, which is coming up later. But we can get into individual application, but that is not the motion that is on the table right now. The motion on the table is about the neighborhood as a whole, not the specific application. Now, there are at least 2 properties that have had enforcement. We've heard from the delegate that there are others. My experience up in the Nootka Street neighborhood talking to residents is that there are multiple properties with accessory dwelling units. Just because a complaint notice hasn't been filed doesn't mean that they're not there. That's one of the reasons why I think a lot of folks aren't coming in here and saying, hey, can you change the bylaw so that I can be in compliance? Because they might then get an enforcement letter. The question before us is not about the specific property. We will get to that. Question before us is, do we change the Nootka Street zoning bylaw to be A, consistent with the OCP, and B, to ensure consistency across the entire neighborhood, which is the purpose of the Nootka Street zoning bylaw. So
the question before us is to elevate this on the priority of our planning department. That's really what we're talking about. Then we'll be talking about the actual proposed bylaw. So yes, Director.
Thank you. Question to staff. If this motion was not carried and life carried on, but this is part of your to-do list, would there be an opportunity to address the issue before the year is out?
Tough to say, Mr. Rodney.
Or is it unknown at this time?
Through the chair, it's unlikely. I did make copies of the work plan. If you would like, you can take a copy and pass it around. For the projects, right, we've received direction from the board for their projects that through the housing legislation that the province passed last year, we would do. So those projects, that's the first group. Those are strategic projects that line up with strategic priorities of the board. Okay, then the next set of work are random board directives that have been delegated to the planning department. And opening up the Nootka Street zoning bylaw to amend it is the last thing on that list because it was only delegated in November. And the other items were delegated sooner. And the next grouping on our work plan are the things we have no control over. They're subdivision applications, crown land referrals, development permit applications, rezoning applications. Those we must respond to immediately once we receive them, and they must be processed. So those things always get in the way of us achieving strategic objectives. But that being said, everything that's listed in the strategic objectives section there, I am confident we can complete all of those things. I wouldn't have put them in the work plan and in the budget if I wasn't confident that we had the capacity to deliver on those things while at the same time delivering on the applications that we need to process.
Thank you.
Yes, I agree. The strategic plan is really what takes a lot of precedence for our staff's work plan. Now I have a copy of our strategic plan, as we all do. Social supports, area of focus. We focus on diversity of housing throughout our region. Changing the Nootka Street zoning bylaws housing policy fits with our strategic plan and the strategic direction. And the reason why that's my thoughts is when this board had a discussion about a strategic plan, I pushed to get that wording in there, that we focus on diversity of housing throughout our region and allowing accessory dwelling units, which is in the area BOCP, fits that strategic direction. That was my hope when we adopted the strategic plan, and to have the Nootka Street zoning bylaw at the very end of outstanding reports, where the top one of outstanding reports is parkland acquisition policy from August 2023. So I think if we do actually want to take housing issues seriously, then we need to address the Nootka Street zoning bylaw, because the only thing it does right now is restrict access to housing. And it creates an R1 single family dwelling policy. So the question for, I guess, the planning committee is housing diversity actually a priority of this organization? Because if it isn't, then let's take it out of the strategic plan and not change the Nootka Street zoning bylaw. But I believe it is a priority. That's why it's in the strategic plan. And therefore, we do need to prioritize this, not to the top of the planning department, because as I'll point out, the parkland acquisition policy is an extension of the regional park service. I do believe the motion on our before us is planning service. Planning department. Planning service is done by, well, areas A, B, and C, and D. And that's why I think this needs to be elevated. And if it's too much work for the planning staff, then maybe the planning committee takes on that role. We strike a working group, we meet with Nootka, and we get this done. There is a housing crisis out there.
Yeah, I appreciate that and appreciate your comments, although I would say that our strat plan would identify everything on this list. So I think it's not about throwing things out, it's about getting the work done, and heard from staff that they think they can get this work done. I do appreciate other ideas, Ms. Rodden.
Through the chair, just to clarify, there are a number of items on the board directives that are related to parks planning, active transportation planning. And the budget does include 10% of planning staff's time goes to supporting regional parks planning. And so our department is broader than just the planning function. It also includes parks and active transportation planning.
Thank you. That's a good point. It's not just one thing. Most of our staff are spread across many of our buckets. So, do you have any other directors, Director Brander?
That's why the motion is worded that way.
Yes. Any other points? Okay, we're going to put this one to a vote. 9.1 to be elevated and priority for the planning services list of priorities. All those in favor? All opposed? 3 opposed. McCormick, Brander, next opposed. Move to number 9.2, which is the actual 321.2 bylaw, Nootka Street zoning bylaw. Director Gisborne.
Yeah, this is a proposed amending bylaw I will point out that the second line, the second whereas should actually be struck out. If we were to direct our staff, I guess kind of clean it up, just make sure it's all compliant. It would be section 5 land use regulations, inserting a new regulation 5.3.1, following regulation 5.3 that reads, despite section 5.3a, one additional dwelling unit having a floor area no greater than 1,200 square feet is permitted. As I understand, if we adopt this and send it to the board, we can give it first and second reading, and then we can hear from the public on Nootka whether or not they're satisfied with allowing accessory dwelling units no larger than 1,200 square feet. I think that cuts out a lot of extra staff time, cuts out a lot of reports and waiting around, and it just says, hey, fair is fair, it makes it consistent throughout the neighborhood, we can move forward.
I think I understand the intent, but obviously CAO or staff, and we take this approach and just simplify the intent and get it done. That's my question.
Through the chair, I think we would need to ensure that our processes are being adhered to. And I'd also like to ask Laura Rodden for her expertise from the planning side of things as to what she thinks would need to be in place and taken care of.
Thank you, Mr. Rodden. Anything that needs to be in place prior to moving on something like this?
Through the chair, I would just comment that the second whereas clause is not applicable in this case. Because that I believe what happened was the director took bylaw for the application that was under consideration in November. So that should be removed. It's not necessary. And then I would suggest a change to the wording so under section 5 land use regulations, in my professional opinion, it would make more sense to say, despite section 5.3a, one accessory dwelling unit is permitted. Because the square footage was only there because of the application we were considering. And accessory dwelling unit is the term that is used. It's a defined term. Accessory is a defined term, and it means that it's smaller than the principal use of the property. So that would be my suggestion. And other than that, I think it could go for first and second reading and direction for staff to post notice to the community.
Would it require a amendment to the motion to have those changes put into the amending bylaw? Because those are really good points from our senior planner.
Yes, he's nodding yes, so we need an amendment for that.
Okay, I would move such an amendment. I know we don't have our usual corporate officer here.
We've got to give our staff a chance to keep up with our minds here, which isn't always easy. So we'll let the CEO try to capture that. You got it before you, yeah.
Clarity, we're removing the second whereas.
Yes, the second whereas can go, and then down here. Okay, I'll let you catch up.
I believe the other one is to remove the square footage.
Right there.
Rather than one additional dwelling unit, one accessory dwelling unit.
That's why we have professional planners. Thank you.
Well, and typically we'd have our corporate officer put it up on the screen for us. We just want to be fair to the CEO about that he understands. Thank you. Go ahead.
Madam Chair, so for clarification, Laura, we remove the second whereas clause and we replace additional with the word accessory.
Correct. And strike out having the floor area no bigger.
Yeah, just ends that line.
It's permitted.
Director Brander.
Thanks, Chair. I think I'm a little confused here. We've got, correct me if I'm wrong, but we've got in the planning department's work plan, we have a report coming regarding this bylaw. Is it not inappropriate to then make another motion regarding Yes, we already have something in the work plan. That was kind of
Well, it's
wrong way to go
I think
about it.
what's probably, we decide what we're asking for before. So, you know, in this case, I think I'll just speak for myself. I understand the intent of this. I would appreciate a report as we continue to learn about housing and the use of changes to our bylaws. That would still help me. I don't know other directors.
Yeah, if we can get, I don't know if I know the corporate officer isn't here, but I don't know if
Through the
CL
chair.
has
Yeah,
any
go ahead.
comment on that.
Through the chair, Laura can correct me if I'm wrong, but that other directive has not been worked on yet or initiated. So something to that is and the other directive already been worked on, then this would be
Thanks for the clarification.
It's helpful for everybody. We defeated the previous motion. Now we're trying to take some action. And Director Fall can eat without making me hungry.
Do you need me to move the amendment?
Yes, thank you.
Quickly moved.
Okay, seconder? I'll second discussion.
Okay,
Good one already.
yeah, I'll be very quick. This is just on the amendment to kind of clean it up, making it consistent with the area BOCP. I think this isn't the main motion, so I'd look for support around the table because this will actually give clear direction when we get back to the main motion.
So on the amendment, all those in favor? All in favor, thank you. That's carried. Now on to the main motion with the amendments. Do I have a mover? Director Gisborne, seconded Director Powell. Or did we already? I think we did. Yes, just let him confirm.
Here, I'd like to know what the motion is.
we didn't have a motion or a mover and a seconder on that yet.
Oh.
And I'll
Thank you, Director Gisborne. You moving?
I'll move that the board consider giving first and second reading of the proposed bylaw as amended.
Do I have a seconder? I'll second. Any other discussion on the main motion now? Yep.
Very simple. I think this will solve a lot of issues up in the Nootka Street neighborhood. This doesn't mean that it goes straight to adoption. This means it'll get first and second reading, which is then when you'll start to hear a lot of the public feedback, which I'm sure we'll hear a lot of up there. And if this is the direction that the planning committee would like to go, when we get to the board, I would be even willing to put forward a motion to rescind asking for the report on the Nootka Street zoning bylaw, which, you know, as we've heard from staff, hasn't been worked on. We see that there's this work plan, which has quite a bit of work on their plate. And if we are able to address the Nootka Street zoning bylaw with a relatively simple and straightforward fix, then we can actually take something off their work plan and actually, you know, save a little bit of time and money because our planning staff are very busy. So I would look for support for this. It can go to the board and then we can just give first and second reading and then hear what the public have to say about it.
Director McCormick?
Thank you. Chair, I have a question. It seems like this is just like a kind of an indirect way of getting it moved up in the queue. So maybe I'm not understanding the motion correctly. Does this, if, you know, doing the first and second reading, et cetera, there's obviously time to create the, you know, et cetera. So does that not impose this work then on top of staff's existing work plan? Does it wait in the queue, although we passed the 2 readings, would that just then wait in the queue for its turn? Or I'm trying to understand the difference between this motion in terms of, you know, pushing into staff's work plan compared to the last one.
But probably for Ms. Rodden, the workflow to handle something like this versus.
It's okay, we're still
Welcome.
Am I here? It's okay, it's just planning committee.
We're gonna just, it's okay, we're just in the middle of some business here, just asking for a response from Ms. Rodden, if she can.
Well, through the chair, so the board can give first and second read bylaw and can direct staff to implement a public consultation process on the proposed bylaw. But yes, it would then be an additional item in our work plan. And as I said to you at the last meeting, the board directives are in chronological order. So it would be at the end of directive list. Mhm.
Okay, thank you. That answer your question?
Yes, it does. Thank you.
All right, Director Brenner.
Thanks, Chair. I mean, I understand the desire, but I'm also being asked to vote on implementing a bylaw that we haven't received a staff report on. And though it may seem simple, I'm not an expert on these kind of things, and that's why we turn to staff to provide us with the ramifications that every amendment may have. So I really feel like we're pushing this through a bit faster than we should. I understand the desire for housing and all that kind of stuff. It's all well and good, but we also have to be careful that we do it properly. So I guess I'm a little uncomfortable with just rushing through this now when we do have a report coming from staff in the work plan. And I don't see the immediate need for it, I guess. I understand the desire. I think it's probably a good idea. I just don't feel like being rushed.
Director Gisborne, here.
Yeah, I've been talking about the Nootka Street zoning bylaw for several years now. The week I turned 40, I am getting too old for this. We can make the decision. This is not changing the official community plan. Bill 44 from the provincial government was to tell local governments to update your zoning bylaws to be consistent with the official community plan. That's what this would do. And it's a fairly simple thing. It would allow accessory dwelling units to be allowed in the Nootka Street neighborhood. That's it. I would love to talk about all kinds of other things, but this is what I consider to be the lowest hanging fruit. It is like sitting on the ground. It is so low for us to just authorize. There is time sensitivity with this item. We've heard from a delegation who has, the stress surrounding their issue. One of their neighbors, they have decommissioned a housing unit. There's other folks that are up there that I've heard from that they say, hey, they've got accessory dwelling units and they're concerned about enforcement. And I think this is a very simple thing. And this doesn't mean that, okay, it goes to the board and then we just adopt it and it's all done. We will hear from the community when we do first and second reading. That's, and whether or not that was a public engagement session or I've already lost the term. Even if that takes, a year or more, the community up in Nootka will actually get the impression that the regional district is taking this seriously. And they'll go like, okay, this is being looked at. And then they will, of course, start letting us know how they feel, even before the staff get ready to do that, public engagement. So I fully support this change to the bylaw to just say, hey, first and second reading, and it might take 6 months. This doesn't change the priority. This doesn't contradict the other item that we just dealt with about asking for the report, but this will just make it clear, simple, and let's get going because we are currently blocking access to housing up there. And I think this is consistent with the OCP. I think this is an easy thing to support. Thank you, Chair.
Thanks. I appreciate everybody's comments, and we have been talking about this for quite a while. And I think I'll speak for myself. I'm prepared to support this for many of the reasons Director Gisborne stated. I understand the effect I think it'll have on the community, and we can continue to do our work. I think it's time to rip the Band-Aid off. We've got a lot more work to do. This is a way forward that makes sense to me. So I'm prepared to vote. Director Fall.
Can I just ask a question through the chair, if I might, because it's not my role to comment on or against this.
But you're gonna. No.
But I'm going to.
No, it's okay.
No, I'm going to say nothing. I just want to make it, because, this can be using for members of the public who are watching. We have a number here. So the question through the chairs, if this was to pass, what would be the process? It'd be the first and second reading would be for the board. That would go on a board meeting. With that, then there's possibly public engagement. There's probably a public hearing at some point after third reading, spectrum municipalities maybe. So I just so it's clear, I think that would be useful to.
You're right.
Clarify.
And I think I'll ask our staff, Ms. Rodden, can you just bullet point the steps after the first and second reading? Because we've been talking a lot about that, but then what happens, I think is what you're.
Yes, well, this would be referred to the Ministry of Transportation and Transit because in essence, it would double the density of the neighborhood. And so they weigh in on traffic flow, right? Impacts of that increased density on traffic flow. And we would hold the public consultation and take a record of feedback received. Then it would come for third reading to the board. There isn't a requirement for Ministry of Municipalities to approve this one, but then it could go for adoption. If I could, through the chair, though, I noticed one other change that would have to happen to this.
Okay.
And that would be the number of the bylaw would be 321.3.
Good catch.
1.2 is the applicant driven application.
Good catch. Do we need to vote in an amendment on that one? Yes.
I'll move the amendment to change 2 to 3.
Second that. Do we understand? We need a separate number for this. Good catch. Thank you. All those in favor of new number? It's carried. Thank you. You got that one? Good catch. Thank you. Greg McCormick.
Thank you. Believe it or not, I'm still sitting on the fence on this. So I guess I have another question, and that is, how much work would it be, Chair, for staff to get to that point where they're preparing a bylaw for first and second reading? And how much work is it to prepare the accompanying report that we would expect before we're asked to approve a bylaw? We would like to see the information, the report pertaining to that bylaw. Is that basically the effect of the previous motion, is bumping its place in the queue? And so that's a question I guess I have to staff.
I think this was sort of the same intent as before, is like, how much work is it to get to that stage? Wherever it is in the queue. Days, months, years. I mean, it's hard to speculate, but there's no template probably for
The chair, the community engagement is that time intensive. Preparing materials, advertising, doing a mail out. All of these things take time to craft and to deliver, and to schedule a meeting, to meet with people, to keep a record of the feedback, and then prepare a report that summarizes all the learnings from the consultation. So it's a fair piece of work. I would say probably if we had nothing else to do and we just focused on that.
perfect world, yeah.
You know, it'd probably be about 10 days. 10 full-time days, but we don't get full-time days because we're
Appreciate how
everything.
hard that is, to answer,
So thank you. Hearing that information, I guess I'm not in favor of asking staff to do this work in addition to, or instead of, the Savary OCP and the various other things that are going on. I agree with where Director Gisborne is trying to go. You're absolutely right. We need to make it fair for everybody that everyone is allowed a secondary accessory dwelling unit. That is a given. But it seems that since we're the ones who send out the enforcement letters, it seems to me that sending out a letter to everyone advising them that there will be no enforcement until such time as this bylaw is reviewed, which maybe isn't totally secure, but at least it's more secure than what they have now. I'd rather see us doing something like that, which is very limited staff time, rather than kind of barging, your way onto the list. I get the timeliness of it, and I'm totally in support of creation of the, secondary units everywhere. But it's the process, I guess, that I'm.
I appreciate your defense of our staff time. From what I've heard is that we can vote on this. If it's successful, it'll get assigned to staff, but that does not mean we would be bumping it up on the list. We've already dealt with that idea. So the work will occur when it occurs according to the workflow that's been assigned. It's just that now it's going to be assigned as in this manner, not the previous report. So in my mind, we're not bumping anything. So we've dealt with that subject. But it's about taking action on this whenever that is to occur. So I saw Director Branders.
Thanks. Yeah, thanks, Chair. Well, I normally don't like going kind of leapfrogging ahead and doing something ahead of receiving a staff report. From what I understand, the process that we would have to go through if we did the first and second readings, that would have to happen either way, with a report or without a report. The fact that Ministry of Transportation has to weigh in, and there is public engagement in this case, that we will receive prior to going to third reading, I think I'm okay with supporting it in this case, with the understanding that the report that we asked for will be taken off of the planning staff's work plan.
Right, and I think, and that's the way I understand it, that we're accomplish the goal as efficiently as possible, but not bump other work out of it. So that's where my mind is at. Any other comments? I think we're. There's more than you want. One more? No, thank you. Good. I'm trying to deal with this. I appreciate this and everybody's efforts to keep in mind. So we'll put it to the vote. All those in favor of this bylaw? That is unanimous. Thank you. It took us a while to get there, but appreciate that. So there will be more to come on that subject. I think we have a new, I don't have anything written down, so I'm running a bit blind, but 9.2 is
9.3 is the reconsideration of the individual application. We are now taking a look at potentially changing it for the whole area. There's been a 1-year enforcement. We are actually now 5 minutes past the start of our hospital district meeting. One of the reasons why I said let's reconsider it is if we don't reconsider it at the next meeting, then it essentially dies and can't be brought back for reconsideration. We could get into it right now, but would it actually make more sense to postpone this item until next month, or give direction like Director McCormick says around sending out saying, hey, we're not doing enforcement until we actually come to some kind of understanding? I'm just thinking about timeliness now, which is unfortunate for the applicant, but we're 5 minutes past the start of our next meeting.
on how we should go here.
My recommendation would be to bore through this.
Okay. We're almost done, so I tend to agree that we should be able to deal with this. Oh, we're gonna lose them. We got a few minutes anyways. Okay, so thank you, Ms. Rodman.
That was
Excellent.
motion from the last.
Okay, is there any way to show this to people or?
It's not.
No? Okay. Okay. So the directors have the benefit of us hearing about this before, the public will not, and we don't have any way of displaying this on the screen. So you'll have to listen to me for a second. So this is the Nootka Street Zoning Amendment Bylaw 321.2 2025 for number 73965 Yaroshuk Road, Electoral Area B, and appreciate the proponents' presentation before and taking the time to sit here and wait. It was moved and seconded that the committee recommended to the board, this committee recommends to the board to endorse the zoning amendment bylaw, and that it be forwarded to the next board reading. So that's where we stand. See, we've crossed that in, right? So for the last part that you're voting on. Yeah. So that is what we're voting on right now, recommending that to the board that we endorse the zoning amendment bylaw. Then, so do we have a mover for that? Director Brander, seconder, Director McCormick. Any discussion on that, Director Gisbol?
Yeah, my reason for voting against this individual application is kind of the same reason I have issues with it today. And it's the second whereas of the Nootka Street zoning bylaw. The need to ensure the level of development in the Nootka Street area is consistent with the available services, including water, sewer, and fire protection. I've heard from a number of folks up on Nootka that they do want to see accessory dwelling units supported. And thankfully, the last motion that we had is moving forward with that direction. I have heard from a number of folks up there that, you know, they're not necessarily opposed to one property having an accessory dwelling unit. They're opposed to changing the Nootka Street zoning bylaw so that one property gets it and another property doesn't. I believe that goes against the intention and the purpose of the Nootka Street zoning bylaw, which is to ensure consistency. That was one of the issues that came up when we were discussing, I believe it was Grasshopper Development's application. I heard a lot of the same thing from folks up on Nootka. They say, well, if that property can get it, why can't I? And that's one of the reasons why when you actually take a look at the Nootka Street zoning bylaw, it's really kind of weird because the official community plan designates rural residential, commercial, and manufactured home parks. However, the zoning bylaw doesn't make any distinction between manufactured home parks or commercial or anything like that. It essentially says one dwelling per parcel or one dwelling per hectare for properties that are greater than, I think, 2 hectares. So that's where I haven't been convinced that going forward with this application would be in alignment with consistency of the Nootka Street zoning bylaw. The reason why I wanted to bring this back for consideration is when I took a look through our development cost charges bylaw, it says that ultimate decision actually lies with the board. So if this planning committee still votes the same way as we did back in February, then, and we still wanted to say, hey, we're going to deny it, then we should, forward that essentially on to the board so that the board can actually give that clarification. Otherwise, the board has to make a final decision. That being said, I actually am kind of in alignment with Director McCormick was recently speaking of sending a notice out and saying like, hey, we're not going to be doing the enforcement on accessory dwelling units until we, sort out the motion that we just passed. So that's my thoughts on it.
Director Brander.
Thanks, Chair. I think we're treading in dangerous waters if we deny the request because the applicant has fulfilled all of the requirements that we placed on them. I don't see the reason for denying it. And I just want to, I think to be fair to the landowner, we need to vote in favor of this. Okay.
Yeah, I've heard this, that we're getting into potential legal trouble if we deny it, which that makes me really concerned because if we deny something and then we find ourselves in legal trouble, that means that we're kind of like, what's the point of even having the vote? So I would actually ask for a legal opinion on this before we make that decision, because if that's the apprehension around the table of if we say no, there's going to be some kind of legal implication, then I would move that we postpone this item until we get a legal opinion.
And taking the legal concerns out of it, I think just to be fair to the homeowner, that we should be voting in favor of this.
CEO.
Through the chair, let me preface this by saying you are the risk takers. The board sets the level of risk through your policy and decision making. Staff present to you advice for consideration. And once that policy is made, staff then manage that level of risk. As the gentleman, Mr. Germain, has indicated today, as the applicant, he followed the process, invested time, money, energy, and he and the public in general are owed procedural fairness. I am no lawyer, and it's just been raised, but it could possibly be considered that acting in bad faith, or it could be considered acting in bad faith to not proceed with this application without a valid reason. And changing the bylaw to be more flexible would potentially not be considered a valid reason. Because this is today and this is now. You don't know what's going to happen in the future. And the board cannot also presuppose the success or public support for a new proposed bylaw amendment. So you have to deal with the here and now and channel your energies on one item of business, not an expansive item of businesses, which is proposed with the new amendment. The other thing is that the QRD has also not received any negative comments regarding the applicant's submission. That says a lot. That speaks volumes. So it would be my recommendation that the board bring back this old motion that was defeated for reconsideration, which you have. So here we are. But again, the board is the risk takers. You must now weigh the odds of any legal challenge and direct staff on what to do and what level of risk to manage from there on.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. I think to me, the fairness barometer is leaning in the applicant's court. He's followed due process. Do we support the processes that we put in place for these things to occur, or don't we? If we deny this application, we are saying, well, we have these processes in place, but we're not going to pay any attention to them. We're still going to do whatever we want. I think that's not only unfair to the applicant, but it does a disservice to ourselves in allowing ourselves to have processes that we're not willing to, abide by. So I support this application, and I think that in all fairness, it will unfold for the whole neighborhood. But right now, for the here and now, this person has followed all the rules. We support or should support the processes we put in place, and I support moving forward with this.
Thank you, Chair. Procedural fairness. I believe that we are following procedural fairness, even if we do deny it. And the reason for denying it, I have stated multiple times, was that the Nootka Street zoning bylaw, the whereas given due regard for consistency. The process is, if someone is non-compliant with the zoning bylaw, they can put in the application. That application then goes through the process and the procedure, and then it comes before the planning committee and the board to make a decision. Decision is based on a number of factors. One of the factors is it is not consistent with the current Nootka Street zoning bylaw. That's why they got an enforcement letter. So to say that they're following all the rules is incorrect. They haven't followed the rules. That's why they got an enforcement letter. And as we also heard, they built the accessory dwelling unit knowing that that was non-compliant with the zoning bylaw. Now it's asking for forgiveness after the fact. I hear that there's a concern around legal risk, but I think that this board can actually hang its hat and say, look, we've got a zoning bylaw, and what that would mean is if we say, oh no, we'll just give you, allow you the accessory dwelling unit, then that means everyone else could come in and put in the application, and we'll just say, well, we're scared about getting sued, so we'll just give them the application, we'll just approve theirs as well, which makes our zoning bylaw essentially not worth the paper it's written on. Like that's my concern, and we do have to give due consideration and fairness to all property owners that are within our zoned areas. We gave due consideration to, I believe, Grasshopper Developments, and we turned that one down. And Grasshopper Developments followed our process throughout their application. And in the end, we made a decision. And part of that decision, when I made that decision, was consistency with the Nootka Street zoning bylaw. When I ran for office, folks asked me, will I support and uphold the Nootka Street zoning bylaw? Well, that was backed into a corner. My political stance was yes. That zoning bylaw came in by referendum. And while the district may not have heard complaints, I have heard from my residents that they are not in support of doing one-off rezoning applications. That's what I hear. That's what I've heard for years. And therefore, my stance is no. The zoning bylaw up there is to ensure consistency in the whole neighborhood. Moving forward with this application or any other application that does one-off rezoning applications, yes, we can consider it. But my political stance is the principle is for consistency. This application doesn't have consistency. And if we're going to be intimidated into thinking that there's some kind of legal risk, then I want a legal opinion. But right now, I feel I can hang my hat on the zoning bylaw is there for a reason to ensure consistency, because otherwise, what's the point of even having it?
Thanks. I'll just add my voice. I am prepared to support the application. Several directors have mentioned why we've had a good discussion about it. And really, it seems to me that we've heard from the proponent, they've done their due diligence and met what's reasonable. We also have taken care of what looks to be a potential bylaw that will come before us that will maybe apply to everyone. But in the interim, we've got people who are anxious about their housing that have complied. And I don't really, the risk is on directors. And for me, I don't see a very high risk being able to allow this person to continue on with their life. And now we are going to deal with the entire area, which serves both targets for me. So that's where I'm at. All right, we're going to put this to a vote. All those in favor of Motion, that's 3. All those opposed, Director Gisborne's opposed. Thank you. Discussion. I don't think we've added anything else. Question period. So just we'll let the media wait for a second. Anybody in the gallery, this is your time for questions of directors. So we had a chance to ask you questions earlier when you were here, but anything on, and it has to be related to today's topics, which that's why you're here. Any questions, anybody?
Just a few comments regarding the two applications.
Just questions though, try to frame it. Use your skills. I know you can.
So regarding parkland, I guess, what is the understanding of parkland?
There's a question.
Well, that would be, I guess, for Mr. Brown.
I think I would defer that to planning.
But it is, thank you, it is a good question, and again, people need to be educated. What is parkland? We have a definition, Ms. Rodden, is there a definition?
Often people think of a playground, but parkland can be many things. It's public property. So a nature trail, which, especially on the upper lands portion of Land Creek, as Clay's photos show, the trail's in pretty rough shape. Had a lot of rain, and the trail to become a trail that all the public can access would take some work. The 3 of us have that last week. 3 of us did get to the end, and I was sick, hacking and coughing. But that has the potential to be a park, what is considered a park. The lower area as well, on the waterfront development, again, the invasive weeds, and even though it will be in a riparian area, invasive weeds can be taken out.
They're everywhere,
regardless of it being protected by riparian covenants or whatnot. Invasive vegetation can be removed, and similarly, trail access to fishing, access to natural features, which include tidal pool. What we did here, I guess, is work trying to figure out how I can.
Yeah, the question would be great.
Yeah. What time is it?
Yeah.
The concepts here that we're working on are consistent to the best that we could do with the OCPs. Deviating from these regarding parkland, it would be a significant deviation from the existing OCP. These areas are I would say, the OCP is mapped. The schedules in the OCP are maps. They're so concept, and these by and large agree with the current OCP, the direction that's given the public as to this is what the area wants to see.
Okay. Thanks for your attempts on the questions. I know it's hard, but we'll leave it at that. Mr. Germain, any questions for us?
I don't think so. No, thank you for the great discussion.
Yeah, thanks. Do we have Mr. Galinsky on the line or anybody else in the public?
Hello, Chair. Galinsky from the Peak here. Can you hear me?
Yes, sir. Go ahead.
Thank you. With regard to item 7.1, which was the stickleback, I believe Director McCormick made a motion to write a letter, and it's not clear to me who that letter would be going to.
Yeah, so I think the intent was the company itself. They're asking for feedback and the Ministry of Environment. But Director McCormick, what's your intent?
The motion that I put forward was that the letter be sent to Provincial Approving Authority.
Right.
That was all. I didn't say a copy to
The chair, it
Thank you.
says in the letter that we're supposed to write applicant as well as the Director of Environment Protection.
Yes.
That was not the motion that I moved. The motion that I moved was that the letter be sent to the provincial.
Okay.
That was the
Maybe we
motion
can
that I
meet
moved.
that with the CEO to see if our staff knows of the appropriate stuff. Because there's probably more than one or two.
There'll be amendment language from the board.
Approving authorities, yeah, there is an email address in the letter. That is.
Sorry, Mr. Galinsky, we're hashing it out on the fly here, but
I understand that. Well, I'd like for it to be clear so I can get it straight, Chair, so thank you very much.
it's as per the correspondence we received. We'll start there with their contact and then we'll expand our net.
Sounds excellent. With regard to items 8.2 and 8.3, which is the Brew Bay development, I understand it was referred back to staff, both of those, with regard to the parks. Am I correct in that, Chair?
8.2.
No, sorry, just 8.2. I'm going from memory, but yeah, thank you. Just 8.2.
Yeah, 8.2 and 8.3, I think they were both referred to staff, Chair, but I was just confirming that.
No, sorry, it's because of the parkland on 8.2. That's what
Word 3 was passed with the alternate number 4.
right. We altered the point number 4. You remember? In 8.3.
Yes, I think point 4 regarding parks was altered in both of those discussions, Chair. So I'm wondering what the outcome was. And was there a motion passed excluding 4 that was passed on to staff? I'm confused, as you can hear.
That's okay. We're confirming too. The CAO's been trying to cover. He's just asked you to contact him for the exact motion and voting. Go ahead, Director Gisborne.
Yeah, when I heard, 8.3, same thing, I thought we were referring that one back to staff as well. So that was my understanding when we did the vote. So if we're doing something different, then can we reconsider that motion? Because it wasn't clear on what we were actually voting. Because if you're saying we're doing the same thing as 8.2, what we did on 8.2 is we referred it to staff. So the intention was we'll do the same
The
thing.
motion that as I remember it was the same motion with the same amendment. We passed it. But I can't confirm it. Go ahead.
Through the chair, the motion for 8.3 was the same as the original motion of 8.2. And item number 4 was replaced with should live.
Okay, thank you.
So when we said same thing, we didn't do the same thing as the previous one.
Thank you. Clear as mud, Mr. Galinsky.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Chair. Item 9.2.
Oh, we get ourselves into trouble. Go ahead.
Item 9.2, I got lost in that motion and I'm hoping that the staff can send me a copy of that at their convenience.
Yeah, he says, give him a call and he'll straighten you out.
I appreciate that. Thanks for the opportunity to pose questions, Chair.
Closed in camera session, we are adjourned. And now we're right back into something else, I think.
Well, cheers.
Who's